Well, good afternoon. On behalf of the organizers, Alkes for Human Rights, MENA Rights Group, and Right Livelihood, I would like to thank you all for joining us on this important day. Today, 24th of April, is a date we wish we would not have to be marking. We should not, because the persons involved should be free in the case of Mohammed al-Qahtani, who disappeared from prison 6 months ago today, and alive in the case of Abdullah al-Hamid, who died due to medical neglect of the Saudi authorities 3 years ago on this day. Both had received the Right Livelihood Award in 2018 for their visionary efforts to reform the totalitarian system in Saudi Arabia. Along with 9 other activists, they had founded ACPRA, the Saudi Association for Political and Civil Rights, and dedicated their lives to shaping a positive future for their home country based on human rights and democratic values. Yet, 10 years ago, the government decided to shut down ACPRA and began passing various sentences on its members, all on trumped-up charges due to their human rights activism. Abdullah al-Hamid was, for instance, sentenced to 11 years, while Mohammed al-Qahtani for 10, on charges that included breaking allegiance to and disobeying to the ruler and seeking to disrupt security. Combined, the sentences of ACPRA founders surpassed 100 years and were all matched with travel bans and monetary fines. Since their trials, the situation in Saudi Arabia has worsened considerably. The sentences being handed down are only getting longer, and those who should be freed, such as Mohammed Fahad al-Qahtani, who completed his sentence on November 22nd, 2022, see their cases being reopened or are possibly disappeared, like in his case. Today, we therefore want to shed light on the situation of activists in Saudi Arabia with a focus on the case of Mohammed Fahad al-Qahtani, stress the calls for his release that we reiterated in a joint statement that was published earlier today, gathering 16 organizations, and honor those, like him, still striving to defend political rights and fundamental freedoms in Saudi Arabia. To this end, we will hear from human rights experts and civil society activists such as UN Special Rapporteur Mary Lawler, Mrs. Falah Sayed, and Yahya Hassiri, as well as the precious presence and testimony of Mohammed's family, his wife Maha al-Qahtani, and his son Omar. There will be some time for some Q&A session at the end, so do not hesitate to write your questions in the Q&A box below. It is my pleasure to now, without further ado, pass the floor to Mrs. Falah Sayed. Falah is a human rights officer at the MENA Rights Group, and she's a lawyer based in Geneva and has experience as a legal researcher in international refugee law and international human rights law with multiple NGOs. She has worked in the investigation and litigation of international crimes. Mrs. Sayed, what is the status of fundamental freedoms in Saudi Arabia today? What tools does the state use to silence peaceful dissidents? And how has this evolved in the past 10 years? The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Fedora, and thank you to all the participants in the webinar, and for having me in this. I'm very honored actually to share this panel with Mohammed's family, with Madam the UN Special Rapporteur and Yahya. It's a true honor, so thank you very much. But maybe Fedora, to answer your question before diving into the core of the subject. The status of fundamental freedoms, before, to understand the status, we probably should understand the context in which the government is operating in Saudi Arabia, because there's a framework that actually enables the authority to silence people such as Mohammed al-Qahtani and other human rights defenders. And what's really striking actually in Saudi Arabia is how much the legal framework itself gives the space and enables the authorities to repress fundamental freedoms. Because the crackdown on public dissent is actually not happening in a vacuum. There's a real an established modus operandi that's tailored for the repression of human rights defenders, such as ACPRA members. And maybe an important point to highlight, this point would be, that 2017 is actually a turning point in the repression of dissenting voices. And this is because obviously the ascension of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Of course, this repression is, I'm not saying that this repression is new. It's not new. It's been going on for tens of years. But with his accession to power, there was many changes that actually ensued in the repression of fundamental freedoms, including an even more restrictive legal framework, as well as a reshuffling of the state security apparatus. So maybe to go into your other questions about also the evolution of this status of fundamental freedoms, maybe we should first focus on the legal framework, and then we will dive more into the state security institutions. But maybe about the legal framework that is currently applicable to prisoners and human rights defenders. We should keep in mind that, first of all, Saudi Arabia has never had a drafted written penal code, criminal code. Consequently, the Saudi judicial system grants a very broad discretion to prosecutors and judges to give arbitrary charges to human rights defenders. Basically, prosecutors can qualify crimes on a discretionary basis. Also, a second thing that's very important in terms of the legal framework that's applicable to human rights defenders is that Saudi Arabia is actually one of the first MENA countries to adopt a cybercrime law. Saudi Arabia was kind of like avant-garde in this sense, because the cybercrime law dates back to 2006, when actually most MENA countries adopted it in 2011 after the Arab Spring to continue the repression. But yeah, this law actually imposes very harsh criminal penalties, and on several activists. It was famously used to charge Raif Badawi, for instance. And yeah, maybe the last piece, which has been really key to crack down on peaceful dissenting voices, is the counterterrorism law. This law has been extensively relied upon in recent years to repress public dissent. And in November 2017, there was a change and an amendment to the 2014 penal law of crimes of terrorism and its financing. It was replaced with the law on combating terrorism crimes and its financing. And in 2017, basically amendments were passed to criminalize a wide range of non-violent acts, including those, and I quote here, which disturb the public order, undermine public security, or destabilize the state or endanger its national unity. Clearly, these acts fall under the right of freedom of opinion, expression, and peaceful assembly. And when we have such a broad definition of terrorism, anyone actually challenging the authority or policies of the state could basically qualify as a terrorist. And these few provisions that I've cited, clearly illustrate the lack of legal certainty, which is conducive to the practice of arbitrary detention. And ultimately, the range of crimes you can be accused of is so wide that virtually anyone can be prosecuted in Saudi Arabia. So that was maybe for the legal framework. And now we can talk more about the state security institutions. Just a few words, because there was also like a turning point in 2017. MBS ascends to power with a clear intention to sideline real or perceived opponents. And in the summer, actually, Saudi Arabia has undergone a complete overhaul of its state security apparatus, which its aim is to reinforce the predisposed legal framework. And in June and July, two institutions were created, the Public Prosecution Office and the State Security Presidency. And importantly, the creation of the State Security Presidency has allowed the government to actually centralize all activities that's related to state security and put it under the control of the king. And how did they do that? They did this by basically placing the Mahabis, which is the Saudi Secret Services police, and all other security institutions under the direct authority of the king. I mean, the direct authority of the State Security Prosecution, which itself is under the reporting control of the king. And what's actually this, what consequences do we have on detainees? Because actually this has consequences on detainees in the sense that it puts the detention centers and prisons that are run by the Mahabith under the control of the king. And a similar process actually happened with the Public Prosecution Office. It was also brought under the direct control of the king. And it basically enabled him and his son, Mohammed bin Salman, to consolidate their power and authority over these institutions. And yeah, I mean, the establishment of these institutions have allowed the Saudi authorities to basically unleash a wave of arrests against individuals who were deemed to be a threat, you know, or critical to MBS's policies, including, you know, peaceful dissidents and human rights defenders. And maybe since I don't have much time left, so maybe last but not least, I would like just to highlight that the majority of peaceful dissidents have actually been tried by the Specialized Criminal Court, which was set up in 2008 to prosecute individuals accused of, you know, terrorism. And while the court, you know, initially it focused on allegations of political violence that were linked to al-Qaeda, this began to change actually in 2010, and the court has been used increasingly for the prosecution of human rights and political activists. And clearly this court is, I mean, not independent. Hearings are conducted in secret. Lawyers have been barred from entering the courtroom and are often, you know, pressured to resign from cases. But yeah, I mean, all in all, to just wrap up, we can see that there's, you know, serious flaws in the Saudi whole legal framework and the whole Saudi context, which creates, you know, this pervasive, how do we say, climate of arbitrariness. And ultimately, if we want to address the case of political prisoners in Saudi Arabia, we also have to address, you know, the systemic causes that is behind that phenomenon. And we need to have this like deep and policy reforms, push for these reforms, and eventually put an end to the climate of impunity. That's the only way I think that the situation will improve.
Thank you very much, Fala, for your work, for your words. I think that we can definitely say that all the 11 founders of ACPRA were pushing for the reforms that you were referring to. And it is my pleasure now to turn to someone who works in very close contact with ACPRA's reality, Mr. Yahya Assiri. Mr. Assiri is a prominent Saudi Arabian human rights defender. Over the years, he has assisted and collaborated with several Saudi human rights organizations and founded Al-Qahtani for Human Rights. Yahya also served as the Secretary General of the National Assembly Party, Saudi Arabia's first opposition party established abroad. Mr. Assiri, turning to the specific case of ACPRA, could you please share with us how it was born? How have the reprisals against its members changed over the years? And how is the mission and vision of ACPRA carried over today, despite the circumstances? The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the organizations, for the panelists. and also for the audience. Actually, as Fala mentioned, we already have an issue and lack in the legal system in the country. Not just that, but also we don't have a constitution in the country. So in the past, because we don't have anything systematic, so also the oppositions or the reformers or the activists, they used to do some work, but also most of the time it's not systematic. So it is like the regime, there is no system with the regime. So also the reformers, they don't have a system most of the time in the back. But ACPRA, or most of the members of ACPRA, they started before ACPRA, most of those members to advocate to have a constitution for the country. And they call for constitutional monarchy. And they started to call for several reforms, including Abdullah al-Hamid and Mohammed al-Qahtani and other members. The mentality or the narrative for the human rights, it was not very clear in the country before ACPRA. So I can say ACPRA, they started something almost new. They started not from the scratch, but also something from underground. They started to have to advocate for something. Most of the people in the country, they don't know what does that mean. And they have been attacked, unfortunately, by lots of people in our society and from religious groups that they are belong to the government or very, very close for the government because they called for constitutions. And at that time, when they called for constitution, the government and the religious people working for the government, they say they want constitution instead of our religion. So they enhanced people to attack those people, to attack the reformers. Those reformers later on, they established ACPRA. Most of them, they came from the same background, the constitutional or the people advocate for constitutions. And some people, they were new for the activism, but they gathered together to have very unique and very important initiative in our society and to establish ACPRA. And when they established ACPRA, I believe that what they did is very important to us, to our society. Is not just because they established a human rights organization, but they established the narrative, they established the idea for the human rights. And right now, I am working with several organizations. I am outside the country, traveling from country to country, meeting so many organizations. But to be honest, I know nothing about the human rights world and this activism before ACPRA. All of that, we learned it from them. All of that, we got this knowledge in our society from those people. They started that work inside the country and they took the risk inside the country. I believe in the beginning it was a challenge because it's something new, but the challenge with the regime, it was not like now, because the regime at that time, they don't know how to react with those group of people, and they feel the difficulty to react with that. And the authority at that time, they feel it is difficult to arrest them in one day. So they took long time to take them to the courts and lots of hearings, lots of back and forth with the trials until they arrested them one by one, until they finished all of them behind the bars. The bad thing and the things that we need to be aware of it, those people, they are the most prominent reformers in the country, all of them behind the bars at this moment. And the regime, they have not paid the price for what they did for them. Even some of them, they passed away, like Dr. Abdullah al-Hamid. The regime, they have not paid the price, but they get rid of those people. So the lesson that will be learned by the government, that if you throw someone behind the bars, you will hear some noise in the first couple of years, then they will be forgotten. At this moment, we have seen Dr. Mohammed al-Qahtani is very prominent and very important reformer in the country. He's still behind the bars, even after his sentence finished. Abdullah al-Hamid, he passed away inside the prison. but unfortunately, no price have been paid by the regime until now. And this is the thing that will make the regime continue the repression and continue this behavior. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yahya, for these insights, including on how groundbreaking ACPRA's work was. And as a founder of ACPRA, Mohammed Fahad al-Qahtani, as you said yourself, is a fierce defender of human rights and democratic values, and was ready to sacrifice his freedom to that. We have the honor today to count among our panelists his wife, Maha, and his son, Omar, who have been the voice of Mohammed since his imprisonment, tirelessly advocating for his release, and since October 24th, for any information about his whereabouts. I will therefore address both of them, and I think Maha and Omar, I believe there are no words to express what you must be going through. And I want, first of all, to thank you from the bottom of my heart for accepting to share with us today. Maha, I would like to ask you to please shed some more light on the conditions to which your husband was subjected in detention until October 23rd, outlining the different phases of his imprisonment and the type of violations that he was subjected to until his enforced disappearance. And Omar, you've not seen your father in 10 years now and have not heard his voice in 6 months. However, people still talk about him like the hero that he is, and we are all fighting for him. Could you share your personal experience on how it feels to be the son of Dr. Mohammed al-Qahtani, especially now that you are deprived of his voice as well? How do you think that each one of us can support his important work? I will give the floor to both of you.
Good morning or good afternoon for some of part. And it's very hard to explain, like what we are going through. First of all, Happy Eid. This is the first Eid, last Friday, without hearing my husband's voice, or usually he's with us, he's supporting us. But this is the first Eid. It's not easy situation, but we're trying to make it through. Since October 23rd, it was the last call from him. We're preparing for his release. We like schedule when the boy is gonna come and visit him and see him after his release. But after October 23rd, we didn't hear. He's been forcibly disappear. We couldn't hear anything from him. We tried to call the prison. We call everybody. We call all the authorities. There is no answer. Basically, there is no one respond to us. And I don't know why they doing this to us. It's a very hard situation, to be honest with you. It's hard to explain or accept, somebody who's calling us every day and they just feel they want to just, punish him. It's not acceptable as a family to feel this way. And for me as his wife and protecting my kids and family, I cannot accept that. I sent letters to all the authorities from, all the authorities in Saudi Arabia. And also the last letter, it was in January 10 to the King Salman and Prince Mohammed bin Salman about his situation. No reply at all. So I don't know what can we do, but I'm trying to do all my power to support him, to release him, to fight for him, and his family needs him. I don't know what I'm saying here, but you can tell that I'm very emotional. I think it's touching my home, my family, and it's very hard to explain it. And in the past 10 years, I thought I'm supporting him, but in fact, this 6 months, I found out, like he's the one who's supporting us, we are not. He's keeping us strong. And I'm sorry, I'll let, Omar continue because I feel like, kind of, like I cannot talk anymore. Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing, Maha.
Hello, so I do want to appreciate you guys for having me on this panel. Personally, I do feel very proud to be the son of a hero. And at the same time, I do feel like it's not fun for the fact that we haven't called him for the past 6 months, but I generally do feel very ambitious and motivated to be pursuing his path in a different way. So I can't wait to see the day of his release. But at the same time, if he doesn't end up finishing his journey, I'm more than willing to continue his journey, but in a completely different way, in a completely different pursuit. So that's what I have to share. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Maha and Omar, for your powerful words, which actually
I want to add something.
Of course.
I want to thank everybody here for the support that, like they help us a lot going through a lot of things. And I'm wondering what kind of legal things that we can take, because obviously for now, it's dead end for us. We tried to reach to all the authority there. There's nobody. I reached to the embassy. I reached to all the authorities back in Saudi Arabia. Nobody respond to us. It's kind of like, I'm dealing with, dead end here. So we are his family. We need to know where is he. I just keep hearing rumors and stuff. And I hear the last rumor that I have, I heard that Mohammed been spotted in the criminal court, April 11th. And the judge accused him for he belonged with others, to the terrorist entities, for terrorist act or something. And obviously they refuse the court and this is accusation. And the judge, what I heard, the judge, he was so mad that he threatened my husband and others, other four, if they didn't accept this kind of accusation and the court, they will give them harsh sentence. I don't know what they're doing. He doesn't have lawyer. He doesn't have anything. I don't know what's going on there. We are his family. We should know, what's going on with him. I should hear his voice. Why they doing this? Why they cutting? Why they doing this action? It's very hard, and it's not pleasant situation we are in right now. And I'm open if anybody who can help us to be strong and face this kind of this thing. So I don't know what I'm saying, but I'm sorry.
Please, Mahat, don't be sorry. On the contrary, I think really thank you for your words and thank you for sharing all this with us. I am hoping that through this event, through this debate, we can shed light on some of the solutions that need to exist out there for Dr. Al-Qahtani. And I'm hoping actually that our next and last speaker can shed more light about the potential international response to this. in fact, your words, Mahan Omar, brought us, I think, also back to the 2018 words that Omar had shared at the Right Livelihood Award presentation, and how these messages differ today. In fact, 5 years on, the situation has only gotten worse. And in fact, in face of this deteriorating situation, Saudi Arabia seems to have fallen out of the radar of the international community, and human rights defenders such as Dr. al-Qahtani as well. So I will therefore turn to Ms. Mary Lawler, who is here with us today. It's with great honor that I will give her the floor. She dedicated her entire career to human rights, founding Frontline Defenders in 2001, with the goal of providing support to defenders at risk. Since 2020, she is now serving as the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders, and thus playing a fundamental role in ensuring better implementation of the UN Declaration on Human Rights Defenders worldwide. Ms. Lawler, what developments do you see regarding the situation for Saudi human rights defender in the future? What do you perceive is the cause of the international community's lack of action? And what do you think is needed to address it? How can justice be provided for human rights defenders such as Mohammed Fahad?
Well, first of all, may I say how deeply moved I am, Maha, by your intervention, and also Omar. I think long-term imprisonment is one of the cruelest sentences that can be given around the world. And last year, I wrote on behalf of 148 human rights defenders in 24 countries who are suffering sentences of more than 10 years. So it's a problem worldwide. And when it comes to Saudi Arabia, I don't have any answers. You are far better placed, you who understand the politics, the culture of Saudi Arabia. Where are the levers that could be pressed? I can only tell you what I do. So I'm independent of states, I'm independent of non-governmental organizations, and I'm independent of the UN. And I see my role as to try and bring the voices of human rights defenders to the oppressive states, and to try and persuade the states to allow human rights defenders carry out their legitimate peaceful work without persecution. Now, as you can see, I'm very successful at that. But it doesn't stop me from trying. The fact that we hear so many terrible stories of people who are locked up for huge periods of time, and as has been just previously pointed out, it's this business about forgetting. That's why I made long-term detention one of the priorities for my mandate. So I think, so what I do is I try and raise cases with the international community. I've already raised Dr. al-Qahtani's case many, many times. And also, you know, I do a monthly case to a group of states that have agreed to take action. And I chose him and the other for one of the monthly cases, you know, Saudi Arabia. So I will continue to do that. Next year, it's the Universal Periodic Review of Saudi Arabia. And what we do with the Universal Periodic Review is we compile information and we send it to all the states, and we ask them to raise the issues with in this case, Saudi Arabia. And for me, I'll continue to formally communicate with Saudi Arabia and to follow up about repression and criminalization of human rights defenders, especially and including Dr. al-Qahtani. And also this recent disappearance, which has crept in, of imprisoned human rights defenders, and the renewed arbitrary detention when they have served their sentence. The other thing I think we can do is we can all use social media as much as possible. I have been really surprised that my Twitter account, I started to get feedback, such as the president of Honduras replied to a tweet I had done, and in a trial where I had talked about some bit of the law, or it was a new law, sorry, that was being developed. They postponed the discussion until they examined it further. So I would never underestimate the power of social media. And in Saudi Arabia, I'm not sure which is the best platform, and you might tell me that, but I have found, particularly with Twitter, that there has been engagement. So I've started to use it as an advocacy tool. The other thing is governments, all governments, they absolutely hate publicity. They do anything to try and protect what they call their reputation and prevent reputational damage. And Saudi Arabia is going on a charming offensive. So it's really important that all of us try and push back against this narrative that, that they try and promote and call them out. I think that's really important, no matter how small or how big you're able to get the information out and get some traction. I see kind of change as a collective effort. We all have a bit that we can do, and I'll certainly continue to try and do what I can. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lawler, for these input and these remarks that actually can inspire also all of us to take action on social media, for instance, and not just at the very high international level. And actually, before I open the floor for questions, I read the questions from the Q&A box. I would like to share with you a video, a solidarity video from fellow Right Livelihood laureates to whom we have asked similar questions to those asked today about the person that Dr. Mohammed Fahad al-Qahtani is, his contribution, and what they perceived as tools to ensure justice for him. And I will share my screen.
Human rights are universal and indivisible. Human rights are also infused with the wisdom and knowledge of traditional, indigenous, cultural, and religious systems of the world. Enforced disappearance is an affront, an absolute violation of all human rights norms as we know it.
Mohammed Fahad of Saudi Arabia has been disappeared.
Al-Qahtani served already 10 years inside the Saudi prisons, and from since he is disappeared based on the information coming from his family. Al-Qahtani and other human rights defenders and women human rights defenders in Saudi Arabia deserve celebration, not criminalization. Those are the people who opened the spaces and see these changes happening in Saudi Arabia. Without those, no one will see Saudi Arabia in any of progress in human rights or women's rights.
In light of this, the contribution and the work of Mr. al-Qahtani and his friends is truly legendary. And it is not only an inspiration for all those who are striving for human rights in Saudi Arabia, but for all of us who's working in this area across the planet.
Two things can be done. The first is to report to the UN rapporteur on enforced disappearances so that this issue is taken up in the UN. And the second, in countries that recognize universal jurisdiction, to try and have the authorities of the Saudi Arabian government, when they travel abroad, to be arrested outside their country.
Hence, the international community has an obligation to ensure that not only human rights are respected, but where those are violated, there is accountability.
And yes, accountability is in fact the very last word said by one of our Right Livelihood laureates, legacy holder. And that is actually the very first question that I would like to turn to the speakers from this from the audience, and that is, what international options exist for accountability for the terrible crimes committed by the Saudi authorities right now? I don't know if perhaps Mr. Asiri or Ms. Lawler would like to take this question. You have the floor.
Well, accountability is one of these things that every report of every rapporteur on human rights defender has recommended in the last 25 years since the declaration was adopted. It's 25 years ago. It has formed one of the recommendations that I have made in all my reports about bringing perpetrators to justice. And indeed, one of the reports I did was on killings of human rights defenders, and it was simply to highlight the terrible tragedy of people being killed for their peaceful human rights work, but also to show that there is absolutely no accountability. Impunity is just everywhere. So I think, you know, I've been doing this work a long time, and I actually think that you can only just keep doing it. You just have to keep on and on and on. You have to persist, you have to resist, and you have to just hope that over time things will change. And since I've been doing it, like I started in the 70s, I've seen a lot of change for the better. So I think it's really important that people never think the issue is hopeless, or that in this case, Dr. al-Qahtani won't be freed. I mean, I spoke to the Saudi ambassador about him in Geneva, and yeah, you know, and I'll continue, you know, but I think we all just have to keep persisting. And that's what you're doing today. You're bringing out his voice, you're bringing out what has happened, you're bringing out the complete and absolute cruelty, inhumanity, and injustice of the Saudi Arabian government.
Thank you very much, Madam Special Rapporteur. Mr. Asiri, would you like to comment?
Yeah, actually, we keep asking for accountability for a very long time, and we try to emphasize that all the time. But unfortunately, it's become very clear now there is not just immunity, but also they enhance the regime, especially the Western allies. They keep enhance and support the regime violations. It is very clear that there is huge hypocrisy from the Western allies by supporting the regime, by supporting Saudi Arabia, especially when I'm talking about UK and United States. We have seen the promises by Mr. Biden before he came to the presidency. At this moment, what he's doing, and we can say clearly, and we are very confident of that, the regime, they don't have legitimacy inside the country. The only thing that they have loads of money, and they are using this money to pay for their allies. Whether if they pay it as corruption for the poor country, they said it is aid or help. And for the rich country, they paid them as corrupted deals, especially with the armed people. So the hypocrisy if I take very clear example, the war in Yemen. There is loads of countries, they said they are against the war in Yemen, but without the war in Yemen, they can't continue from 2015 up to 2022 without the aid, especially from the UK and the United States. They keep enhancing the regime, supporting the regime with every single violation, and giving their coverage and immunity for the regime. So we are not asking them to help us, but we're asking them to stop helping the dictator regime, stop enhancing those dictator regime. If you look at the Saudi media, one of the most popular photo, they used it they keep use it for propaganda for Mohammed bin Salman. That's when he was walking in 10 Downing Street here in London to meet Boris Johnson. At that time, they used this picture for propaganda. That will show you how do they rely on their Western allies, and how those allies supporting the Saudi regime. And we know Biden, he criticized the Saudi regime before he came to the presidency, but also Donald Trump, he did that. But when they came to the power, they are looking for their interests, looking for the money, the contracts, and that's it. And this is the most issues that we are facing. And we heard now, we listened to al-Qahtani, and her speech was very emotional and touched all of us. However, Maha, she is not alone. There's thousands of people inside the country, they are suffering. There is thousands of women, they are waiting for their kids because they are in death penalty role. There is lots of people, they know nothing about their families members. There is lots of people, they lost their families members behind the bars just for tweets or for something. We need to be proud of it, like what Mohammed al-Qahtani did. Unfortunately, all of those people, they are suffering because this dictator regime want to silence everyone, paying his allies, and the allies give the regime the coverage and give them the support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, I think the balance between finding political will and balancing political will and economic interests should actually not exist when it comes to human rights violations. And it's a very tough reality to deal with. I will just now turn to the next question that I see here, which is from Venla Stang, how can international human rights organizations best assist the Special Rapporteur Lawler in her work? I will therefore give you back the floor, Ms. Lawler.
My main tool as rapporteur is to write formal communications to the government concerned, outlining my concerns. And I have done this in the case of Dr. al-Qahtani. But in order to do this, I need really clear information sent to me, and with as much evidence as possible, and consent to go ahead with communication at the same time as somebody is submitting a complaint. I take a people-centered approach. So that means I write up the case, I ask the questions, and they come back. So for example, with Dr. al-Qahtani, I asked about information on his health situation, the type of medical care provided to him, on his treatment, all of that kind of stuff. And I joined, I had some other people involved as well, where when the sentence was renewed, and as I said, I specifically met the Saudi Arabian ambassador at my request last March to discuss the case of Dr. al-Qahtani and the others. But it's like knocking against a brick wall. You know, it's just, I said, you know, I was saying that I thought it was absolutely terrible and cruel that he hadn't been released, you know, after his sentence had expired. He should never have been in prison in the first place, but to keep him there when his sentence had expired was so cruel. And the Saudi ambassador said, oh, well, he must be having another sentence. And, you know, I mean, it was just the blatant, I suppose, the blatant dismissal of a person's rights that everyone is entitled to, no matter who they are, where they are, and the abuse of these rights by a government, despite the fact that they have committed to upholding international standards as a member of the UN. So what I would say is just to get back, write me complaints, give me specific evidence-based information so that I can do a bit of further research and submit it to me. And if I can't, you know, I'm responsible for the world, and there are human rights defenders all over the world, you know, who have been persecuted or attacked or killed. So I can only take up the most grievous cases, but I always take up killings, disappearances, long-term imprisonment, you know, so please do write to me. And don't forget the other rapporteurs. If you go on to the OHCHR page, you can go to special procedures and you can look at the different special rapporteurs that there are. And you can, you know, in the case of Dr. al-Qahtani, you know, there's a special rapporteur on enforced disappearances. You know, there's a special rapporteur on health. So you could, you know, try writing to the other rapporteurs with information, but gearing it specifically towards their, you know, whatever their mandate was. As well as that, as I said, you know, I have a website, I try and put as much information out on the website, and also and I always, as soon as the communications become public, I put them there. And so it's slow, tedious work, but it's the way the system for me works. International organizations and intergovernmental organizations, I think you just have to keep banging away at them. You know, you have to find your allies wherever they are. And now tomorrow, I'm speaking to the EU human rights representative, and I will raise Dr. al-Qahtani's case. But, you know, you just have to use every opportunity that you get, either, as I said, on social media, or finding out who's working on Saudi Arabia in what organization, banding together to increase awareness and increase visibility about the legitimate work that the defender has done and is doing. You know, but so for me, that's the way that I approach things anyway, and certainly that's the formal way of engaging with the rapporteur.
Thank you very much, Madam Special Rapporteur, for letting us know how we can best support you. I think all of us here will continue to bang at all the doors and take every opportunity we can in order to raise the case of Dr. Mohammed Fahad al-Qahtani. This will conclude our event. In the past hour, we have discussed about the current situation in Saudi Arabia, the way that the regime represses peaceful dissent, We have talked about ACPRA members and how groundbreaking their work was in calling for reforms and democratic freedoms. We have then turned to the remarks from Dr. Mohammed al-Qahtani's family and their call for help and answers over their husband and father's situation, and reflected on what would be needed at the international level to address this issue and this case, as well as listen to Ms. Lawler's work and how she and her mandate are striving to get us the answers that we deserve to get over his case. I think in the name of all the organizers, I would like to thank all the panelists once again for all their interventions, and all of you in the audience for your participation. I think that if there is one key message that we can get today is indeed to keep knocking at all doors, well, banging at all doors for answers. Thank you very much and have a nice rest of the day.
Thank you so much for everything. Thanks.
Thank you.